Fitzmaurice as well, if that's all right.
First of all, thanks for your presentation. Minister, I agree fully with the concept of people being able to work, be it from a hub or be it at home. As you are aware, no more than anyone else from where we come from, there are a lot of areas that are very short on internet access, and I know that some towns, in fairness, has been brought up to spec on that. I'll be fairly brief on this. You spoke earlier about libraries and different facilities. There are a lot of communities in a lot of small towns, as you are aware of, be it old technical schools or be it community centres or different buildings in towns that they are trying to refurbish and get back into, that you can facilitate people and encourage them to set up, be it in a small office. The first thing you have to do is make sure you have the internet access. Second of all, you have to get the building into a state. I know that under RED some have done it, but the funding streams that's required takes them a while to get there, to be honest about it. You have some DTBs involved, in fairness to them, but you may have to go through LEADER, and it takes so long. Is there any way that we can streamline something, that we target this specifically under, be it the rural programme, that say under the Department of Rural Affairs, that we can hit it and say, well, we're going to give the opportunity, not even to the bigger towns. I am talking about trying to get the smaller towns, the Glenamaddies, the Ballygares, all these size towns, Strokes towns, you know, the Castlereaghs, to make sure that we can keep local people in local areas. You mentioned the broadband officers, and with the best will in the world for some of the broadband officers, while you ring them up and you tell them about the situation of broadband, there may be a lot of small businesses in an area that explain the situation they're caught up in of bad broadband, but they cannot do anything, to be brutally honest about it. Really all they are is a messenger at the moment until we have the rollout of the National Broadband Plan right around the country, because there are small businesses in rural areas. I see beside myself you have the likes of Warden Burke. Air came out the road to within a mile out, and after that to hell with it. You know, they have no broadband. 22 people are working in it. Broadband is required because they're working in, be it England and be it Canada and be it America. But the problem is that we haven't the infrastructure in place. And while it is great, and I want to acknowledge, while it is great that in some towns we are now, through private investment, it's not public investment so far, we have been put in a situation where it's making it more accessible for those people to do their work. There are a lot of areas around the country that we can't do this, but the funding, and I would ask you, could you work on the LEADER funding especially, that it would be made more available for facilities like that to try and get up and running. I know that, in fairness, the likes of the REDS project was a help in areas, but to get you could need 100, 150, 200,000, and it's a payback, because if you look at those people living and working in an area, you may stop them from leaving a rural part of the country to go into a city and putting the pressure on the houses or the housing in the cities. And that's the big, I think, like we can go round in circles all day and talk about every bit of smart technology, but we have got, and I know there are places, and in fairness, down through the last 20 or 30 years, a lot of towns between community centres and different buildings have come up a lot. I'm not saying that we haven't come forward, but to put the final sort of the tin hat on it and make sure that we can get this facility and encourage people into those areas. And it takes money. There's no point. You talked about a library. I know in one place in Glenamaddy we're trying to get the library as a tenant in the technical school, but to get an older building, especially brought up to spec, it takes money. You know, you're from the country, you know QS and as good as anybody, and to get that kickstart is the big thing. To facilitate the people, it's nearly like going up a stairs. You have to put the first step in and keep putting in all the steps to get to the top, and to get there quick enough around the country to facilitate that. And that's the question I have for you. And after that, I have no more.
Thanks, Deputy. Minister.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Tracy, I just answered a few questions that were there about the first thing there. Deputy O'Keefe was on about the IDA, and I think it has moved way beyond what you're talking about, Deputy O'Keefe, in that the foreign direct companies are telling the IDA, we want to see where people can work remotely. So the day of getting 1,000 jobs or 500 jobs into a big building is we're moving away from that. We're back to where the FDIs are saying, have we the facility for people to work in their own areas? So, for instance, can they work out of, like we've done in Tubbercurry, can they work out of Tubbercurry, or can they work out of these other towns remotely, work remote? And that's what it's all about. So the IDA, they don't need any remit, because the remit, the demand is for this from the foreign direct companies. So what we have to do is to provide the facilities so that it can be achieved, and that's the way it's working. So FDIs are telling we as there's no point in us telling the IDA what they should be doing. They're actually, we have to facilitate the FDIs.
Government normally do, but go on.
But that's the way it is. So basically, the FDIs are in that space where we have to provide and also map out what we're doing and what we have to say, well, look, at in Tuam you can work remotely, or in Glenimady you can work remotely. So we have to do that. So coming back then to what you're saying, Michael, in relation to the broadband officers, and I do agree to a certain extent. Up to now, they have been. You rang them when you found out to find out where you were on the broadband rollout. But basically, the broadband officer concept is completely different from that. I was saying before you came in, for instance, Senator Hopkins was talking about Ballinasloe, where the library was vacant for 18 months after it was turned into one of these hubs. That the broadband officer is there to coordinate what we have, the assets we have, so that the IDA know what we have, so that the Enterprise Ireland, and I was saying earlier that Grow Remote are going to meet with the broadband officers to try and get more collaboration on the concept that we have here as well. So the broadband officer's role is going to, I think it'll be going from what you call being a broadband officer, that it'll be an office within the local authority, so that people will be able to go in there and get more information about where they could locate. I don't think that, but Tracy can answer itself, that the Grow Remote is not a concept where we're trying to get companies. I think the jobs are there, is to get people to apply for them. That's the jobs are available, is to get people to apply and to know that they're there. So a lot of what's going on is in relation to knowledge and understanding of what actually is out there. You mentioned about the old buildings, and you mentioned about the Leader Fund, and Deborah Rabbit mentioned it earlier on. Basically, where we have buildings that we can utilise, fine, and where we have buildings that are derelict in places where we don't have a library or whatever, we should be looking at them to bring them back into use. Personally, I think the Rural Regeneration Fund is the way to go, because you took about 200,000 or 500,000 to do up a building between Firecert, the whole shooting match. That's where the money is, right? So that's what we should be looking at, is identifying buildings in towns where we could utilise them for multi-purpose use then as well. But where we have a library in place, we should, I said earlier, the library shouldn't be a closed shop and only open from 9:30 in the morning or 9 o'clock at 5. So we have the open library access is going on now. So in a large number of libraries, we're rolling out where you get a card, you can access it from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, 365 days a week. That's happening already. And you can take out your books, you can put them back in without through the card. So all of this kind of stuff is happening. But I think that the leader is one thing, you know, the people can apply through leader, but I think the Rural Regeneration Fund is probably where a lot more can be done, and I think the opportunities are there and the funding is there. There's 1 billion available over the next 10 years, and there's 315 available in the next 3 or 4 years. So I think what we need to be doing is to look at all the means of funding. But I said also earlier that every town could have a different asset and a different ask. So we just cannot give the same thing to everybody. And that's why we've done a pilot scheme on 6 towns for them to come back with what they want from the ground up, rather than people at central government telling them, this is what we're going to give you. So that we try and change the whole thinking process about how we develop the villages. That's it, I think. I think I've covered it all. If there's a...
Just before I call in Trace,